Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and today I'm going to be making a Cars smash cake. Now, whenever you're making a smash cake, there are a few pointers that you do want to follow. Now, I'm not going to say that this is a super easy smash cake to make because there is some hand painting required. But if you're just starting out using fondant, this is a great place to start. So first, what you want to do is you want to make sure whenever you're making a smash cake that you keep the fillings very, very simplistic. I usually just like to go with a vanilla filling because, it's going to get smashed anyway, so you don't need to waste a whole lot of product making this taste super, super different or delicious. Though using a nice fluffy and smooth buttercream won't hurt because you do want to make sure that the texture is right on. In my personal experience, every time I've kind of tried to do a smash cake with my children, it doesn't actually turn into a smash cake session. For some reason, my children that would ordinarily stick their hands in anything become a little bit nervous around a fully decorated cake. So I like to use Italian meringue buttercream for smash cake sessions just because I find that the crust doesn't form so hard in the fridge, so even if it's been in the fridge and it's crusted over, it still is susceptible to some finger markings, whereas American buttercream gets really, really hard on the outside, and so it looks less quote-unquote messy whenever you have a cake smash session. Now this time around, we do want to make sure that the buttercream is nice and smooth because I am going to be sticking that fondant applique on the front. So everything does need to be smooth for this, except for the top. You could add a little bit of texture there if you would like to. If you're ever struggling with making sure that everything is fully covered in buttercream, just make sure to put it in the fridge for at least 10 to 15 minutes between layers. The trick to having super smooth buttercream and even layering is just to keep that spatula or the bench scraper in one spot the whole time as you spin. Once you're happy with your final buttercream coat, then you can get started on the fondant applique. I'm just going to take some white fondant, and I always like to work with white fondant, especially when I'm painting, so that all of those colors show up nice and vibrant. Be sure to lay down plenty of cornstarch for this because you don't want any risk of anything sticking. Don't worry about the fondant becoming too dry. You're going to be putting lots of paint on this anyway, so it's going to moisten up again. What I'm doing here is I'm taking a cake tool. Really, really important that you don't take an x-acto knife for this part because all you're doing is you're indenting all of those details. You can pretty much follow this method for any fondant appliques that you're going to do. Once you've done a general indent of the details, then you do want to take off the piece of paper and then indent it further. Make sure that once you've cut out the fondant piece with an x-acto knife, you really plan where you want to put this on your cake. I made sure to put it at the front where my cake looked most perfect. Now I'm going to be adding that checkered flag at the bottom. So all I'm doing here is I'm taking a pastry cutter and using it to cut out squares. There are so many better cookie cutters out there that can cut a bunch of squares at once, and you don't have to do this at all. You'll end up with a lot more perfect squares than I do. I want to mention that I'm using Satin Ice Fondant. I always make sure that I buy black fondant. I never try to dye it unless I'm desperate and I've run out. The reason is because the saturation of color really changes the texture of your fondant, so it's always best to just buy your fondant black as is. You'll notice that I'm just able to place these checkers on without adding any extra adhesive. The reason is because with Italian meringue buttercream, even once you put it in the fridge and it's fairly set, it does stay nice and soft still. So if you used American buttercream, you will need to put some water or some edible clear food gel or some extra buttercream to adhere that to the buttercream. My camera ran out of battery, so unfortunately I had to skip through some of this and I did not catch it on camera. But basically all I'm doing is I'm taking some edible airbrush in that red color and I am painting my Lightning McQueen. In order to add some depth, I always make sure that I have white food coloring on hand as well. That's what's allowing me to kind of soften up some of those red colors. A little trick that I like to use when I apply too much color by accident or the color just comes out a lot more saturated than I expected is I just add a little bit of white food coloring. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking little dots of fondant and putting it on the eyes and also making sure that I add a little white dot in the corner just to add a little bit of animation to it. I want to cover up these little gaps here, so I'm going to use some grass. I often see Cars cakes made with cacti in the background, so if you want to add some of those to this, that would look really, really nice as well, and it's very fitting to the movie if you've ever seen it. You'll notice that I do have some green fondant lying around, and I purchased this when I made a Hulk cake a long time ago for my daughter, but generally I would just dye this green because I don't use this type of green that often. Also, I want to mention that all of the materials that I'm using today I always put in the description box below, and I'm not sponsored by anybody, so these are truly just the products that I really like to use. You could totally use cutters for that part that I just did with the clouds, but I just chose to use my fingers instead as I'm in a little bit of a rush. To make that number one standing, I just put it around a popsicle stick by adding some water in between the two layers of fondant. Now what I'm doing is I'm steaming a little bit of the cake and adding on all of those sprinkles. Now I will say when you're steaming a buttercream cake, you primarily want to hit all those fondant spots instead. Now let's get to the pricing. The pricing is very, very straightforward. This is $75 for a 6-inch buttercream cake with fondant details. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys.